All right, guys, next up we're going to look at those different lights options that we have a little bit more closely. The two I want you guys to focus on is Omni and Spot. So I already showed you Omni. IES was the wrong route, but Omni lights allow you a little bit more control about how that particular disc that we have, which represents the light bulb, right, itself, actually modifies how that light spreads through the space. So when you're in your material panel, let me get rid of this one so you can see exactly what I did. The emitter spot, 8 inches, let's clone that material. And let's rename this to, well, it's also going to be an emitter spot 8 inches. Let's just call it emitter spot 8 inches B.
So you're recording right now?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, do you need something?
Yeah, when you're done
Announcement?
recording, I'll come back.
Okay, we can do an announcement. I can pause it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
All right, back to business. So the 8-inch B, right? So we'll just call this the B spot, right? So our B spotlight is going to change. When you click on emitter spot at the bottom, we're going to switch the projection to spot. And what you'll see is that it opens up a couple of different settings that you sort of need to understand to a certain degree. So obviously you know the watts and efficacy is what we were just talking about, how much it fills the space and how much light there is. But the cone angle, fall off type, and the blur are the ways that you can get different sort of types of lights. So for instance, have you ever, there's a spotlight, right, like a literal spotlight like you would see in a theater, which shines a very concentrated light on a very small area. And then there are lights that are called, for instance, floodlights. And those are, well, let's take a look at that actually. Spot light versus floodlight. Let's see if we can get a cool little image that describes exactly what that is. Boom. All right, so I guess this is kind of an example. That's not a great one. But anyway, so a spotlight is very concentrated. A floodlight really spreads the light out over the area. So that looks like headlights for a car, but house lights have more floodlights around the outside, right? So if you're ever walking by somebody's house and a big bright light turns on that fills up like the entire front yard, that's a floodlight. A spotlight is what you see in a theater. Beat that one to death. So the cone angle is pretty simple, right? You see a very narrow light, the cone angle is going to be very small. If you see a very wide light, like a floodlight, the cone angle is going to be very large. So you can modify this to your liking. You can only go up to 180 degrees, meaning your light, like ours, can literally spread across the ceiling, which is dang near impossible to do with any type of light unless you have sort of like a bulbous lens, which we don't. So generally speaking, the range of these kinds of lights usually falls anywhere from like 45 to about 90 degrees for typical lights, but you can go a little wider than that for some cases. So I'm actually going to switch this to a 90. And the fall-off angle is interesting. The fall-off angle essentially defines how far into the space the light is going to penetrate. It's, how do I want to describe it? It's sort of in balance with the intensity of the light. So you could have the fringe of the light fall off of being bright. So if you actually, this is a pretty good diagram for it. So something like this, right? If you think of a floodlight, right, in terms of the cone angle, it gets super wide, right? And you would think that the light would just shine out directly in that direction, right? But it doesn't. The fall off angle is about how the light that's being spread around the space can fall off, right, in intensity as it nears the edges of the spread of that light, if that makes any sense. So that's what you're seeing here. That's my understanding of it. Don't quote me on that if you're writing an autobiography. It may not be exactly right. But that's how I understand it, and it helps me. So the fall-off angle generally doesn't need to go very high, 5, 10, 15 degrees, something like that. But you can get really crazy with it and start to do like really soft lights with really high fall-off angles for more like mood lighting type stuff if you really want to. So we're going to kind of stick with like a 90 and a 10 for this exploration. And then you've got a couple of fall off types. I want you to stick with linear for now. Okay, just stick with linear. Don't overcomplicate it. And then if you need a special type of lighting, then we can dig into whether or not you want a different type of fall off. Okay, it's not that common for basic renderings. And then blur, it's also something that we're probably not going to need to fiddle with for a while. Okay, so let's stick with just dealing with cone angle and fall off angle. And if you'd like to, you can kind of warm up the light a little bit. I think I'll go down to maybe 5,000 Kelvin. Actually, no, I'll go up to like 5,500. And let's do, oh, I need to change the scene. So when you go back up to the top layer, the other thing you need to do is change your emitter scene to show a different type of emitter. So now that this is a spotlight, not an omni light that we're using for spotlights, you need to switch it to emitter spot. And so now what you can see is the spread of the light from the source of the light at the ceiling. So jumping back down, let's make this. Let's pretend that it's a little bit more physically accurate, and let's go to like a, I'm going to go a little high, so a 120 watt bulb with like 250 efficacy, something like that. Actually, I guess we have to go down lower efficacy. Let's go 150. Boom. Okay, so basically that's the intensity of your light in your space. If it's not hitting anything, you won't see that amount of brightness. But where it reaches into the space, you will see some more brightness. So we have emitter spot, sampling level. I wish we could get more distance out of that, but oh well. Let's use this for a little bit, and I think I want to put this on my spotlights. So let's put it on can light, and let's give it a go with a draft render. Okay, so I'll give you guys a little bit of time to get caught up on that and do a draft render as well, and then we'll get some feedback on it and maybe make an adjustment or two. Any questions? No questions so far? Okay, great. Oh, I needed to go higher, I think, in the wattage. Oh wow, that started at really high. From 150? That doesn't seem right. Something seems funny. Hang on a moment, guys. I need to double check something. Okay. So, if I recall correctly, and I may be wrong about this, I may be, the emitter spot light type requires that you actually use a spot family that you have in the Rhino environment. I may be wrong, but if you test it out, for instance, with like a light that actually tilts in the space. So how many of you are familiar with this light family? Not many of you. Okay, so it's up here. Remember I had in the beginning of the class when I was setting up everything, I showed you guys like really quickly how to make some very simple lights and stuff. So I put this toolbar on here. This is the Spotlight native Rhino family. Like it's a Rhino spotlight. But the way it works is you just go to a location and you I got snapped to something. Draw a circle, and then you have to draw the spread of your cone, something like that, and then you need to move it down into your space. Now, with this light, the one thing that is very important is that the actual light source comes from the apex of the cone. Okay, so when you're using this, make sure that the apex of your cone is in the space, not on the surface. So not on your surface like that, because it's very, very likely that the apex of your cone is actually inside the surface like that, and then you won't see anything. Okay, that's a very important distinction. So I've already modeled one in my space, so I'm going to get rid of this extra one I just did. And it's important to note that this particular family is how you're going to be able to modify you know, the direction of your lights unless you're using like an IES light or something like that. So this spotlight, the way we have it right now, will shine down on the space, and I close the draft render because I'm silly. I shouldn't have done that. But anyway, we can take this family and sort of tilt it. Oh great, not ortho. Like that. And now I should have something that is shining against my wall. Yeah, I'll just put it here for now. That should be fine. Like that, like that. There. So let me do a quick render with this light actually shining against the wall, and we'll test whether or not I'm recalling correctly. And there it is. Okay, so you can already see it in the draft render what it's doing. The light has actually tilted and it's shining against the wall, and that's allowing us to use the spotlight family. Whereas if I just tried to apply the spotlight family to the surfaces, when we loaded it, this multi-light panel did not show the updated material. Okay, maybe it's glitching. That part I don't know. But it's much healthier to use the spotlight family. So you can do stuff like this and really kind of blast out the wall if you've got like a piece of artwork there and you really want to focus on it or something like that. What questions do you have? No questions.
So that point has to be inside the walls?
The what?
The little point that you talked about?
The point needs to be inside the space. Yeah. Yeah, that's very important, because if you put it up above the space, even ever so slightly, because I originally modeled it like that, and if I try and do a draft render, it's actually shining the light inside the gap of that space. If it'll even draft render. Oh, I'm in the wrong view. That's why.
So the point is where the light comes from?
Yes. The point is where the light comes from. Okay.
So the circle is gonna face in the object you wanted.
Correct. Yeah. And one thing that I'm not 100% clear on at this stage, and I need to do some testing on it, maybe I'll do some testing with you guys here today, is whether or not the cone actually defines the fall-off angle of the source of the light that you have in Maxwell. So I'll do some testing and verify that for you, but this will at least get you to get those tilted lights that you're looking for. So I'll do a quick test right now, actually, and then I'll capture it in the same video.